What's poppin', y'all? We back at it with some more Surviving El Chapo Flores Twins content. We going through part 4 of the Connect podcast with Johnny Mitchell and Charlie Webster, executive producer of Surviving El Chapo, along with 50 Cent. Let's get it.
Do you think they would have taken, if their charge was 15 or 20 years from the original indictment in America, do you think they would have rather done that than go through what they had to go through to cooperate? Like, do you think the prison that you have to go through to cooperate is worse than the physical prison?
Well, I think, they were in physical prison, as well. So I think just time. from what they said, yeah, they did do time.
Yeah.
And, they didn't get it easy with their time.
Okay, so let's
let me answer your question.
Yeah, sure.
Let me answer your question because I think it's really important. So from when I spoke to Pete about this, and Pete said to me at that time, which you're questioning about, he would rather have died than go to prison. Right? So that was there.
He'd also been a captive twice. Yeah, exactly. So I understand.
So that was his mentality.
You see, Johnny gave the skeptic face there for a minute. They didn't catch him on camera in the cut and the edit. But then he switched it up with he's been captive a few times.
Then go to prison, right? So that was there.
He'd also been
See that? He was giving her the long pause, the bullshit face.
So that was there.
He'd also been a captive twice. Yeah, exactly. So I understand.
So that was his mentality. And actually, he said that only a year before they cooperated. So his mentality was absolutely not. And by the way, it was Jay's idea in the first place, and he had to persuade Pete.
Right.
So again, they've got different personalities, but they do things together as a one, which that identical twin relationship is really important in this story. I think it would have been very different if they weren't. So I think it's really hard to, I can't answer that question because I'm not Pete and I'm not Jay. So, but I know from spending time with them and telling their story that wasn't in their heads at the time. So it wasn't like they knew the foresight that they'd going to cooperate, that they were going to be with Chapo and end up in that situation. There wasn't that foresight to make that decision.
How old were they at the time?
When they made the decision, like 23, 24 years old.
Yeah, that's pretty
young. So they were super young.
Yeah.
I mean, they got out of prison when they were like just turned 40.
Okay, so let's move
So just
through
to your point, it's like it's really very well going. Do you think that if I don't know, but I do know their mentality at the time was they'd rather die than go to prison.
Right.
That's why they escaped to Mexico.
Right.
I don't think they knew they were going to end up
doing time when they cooperated.
With Chapo, or no, they did think they were going to do time.
They knew they were going to do time.
Yeah,
when they turned themselves in.
Yeah, of course, they turned themselves in, knowing that they were like, how Jay was like, do we want to talk about this now?
This is supposed to be his interview, and she is driving, but she can't. She's the only one that can drive because he don't know where the road goes. She's the only one that knows where the road goes. He don't know nothing about it.
Wanted out of the life, and he wanted a better life for his children. And I think they felt like I know that they felt like they never got a choice in their life. And I understand what you're saying. And yes, there is always things where you're like, well, you had a choice. I mean, I look at sometimes things in my own life and it's like, you feel like you don't have a choice, but you always have a choice. And whether it's a bad choice or another bad choice, you still always have a choice, right? But sometimes in that moment, it's really hard for us to see that we have a choice or a different choice that we could possibly make, because sometimes it just feels like we're frigging stuck in a situation in life.
Yeah, and they were running, and I understand.
Yeah.
They were running so fast. They're going house to house.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of pressure moving tons of coke.
Yeah,
it's a lot. It's high stress.
Yeah.
You can only imagine how many people was running tons. How many people could say they had that experience?
Yeah,
it's I can imagine. It's high stress.
Yeah. So then
they made that choice. This was 2005. What year did they do? 2005. They turned themselves in.
Yeah.
So they go to the border, I think it's through a lawyer, right? It's Val helps.
Yeah,
she gets in contact with a lawyer, and that's how the whole process.
Good, you do know
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, it's like he listened to the last 4 episodes. He read the last 4 chapters of the book. Read the first one probably, and then read the last one. That's what happened.
Do you know the story? You might not know where I'm from, but you do know the story. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. You got to get your Wikipedia page up.
Well, you should have read it.
We don't do much prep for the show.
So, lesson in that next time. Give me a phone next time you got somebody, and I'll tell you. I'll give you like some bullet points really quickly.
Will they come on this podcast? Can you get us?
She's destroying him right now. She's telling him how to do his show. She's like, listen, next time you got an interview, you need some pointers on how to do this right, the right way. Holla at me. I'll let you know.
Next time you got somebody, and I'll tell you. I'll give you like some bullet points really quickly.
Will they come on this podcast? Can you get us the Flores Twins?
Yeah.
Really?
I could.
She's super
So are they on the
Potentially.
run? Are they in WITSEC, I think?
I
Now?
can't say.
Okay. You
But,
can't even say that.
no, but I could maybe, I don't know whether they do it sat with you, but I could definitely get you.
We would fly to
with
wherever
them.
they were at. I don't know if they'd let us. We could it wouldn't have
Where
to
you
be
can't go to where they're at.
Right.
That's even worse than them coming here.
It's probably like South Dakota or something. They probably got them in are they in the United States? Can't even
Yes.
say that? Okay, gotcha. Now they turn themselves in. How long, because Chapo doesn't, how long before the indictment? Like how long did they have to?
6 years before
6 years of cooperating?
before they knew that before they were sentenced, yeah.
How long?
Because they were like not going to be sentenced until Chapo got caught. That was the whole thing. But obviously they didn't know that. So I'll give you a quick rewind because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, of course.
Because we were talking about cooperating and you know that it's not like here's a bit quick of information, let me download and then let me go. They cooperated for 8 months in Mexico. So 8 months of actually doing this in Mexico, right under the nose of Chapo. Yeah. Whatever you think.
Yeah.
And not safely behind prison walls, no. Under Chapo with their family right there, with people, quote unquote, protecting them that were Chapo's people anyway. So that could have all gone bad at any moment over there in Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't even know how they held their nerve to be able to do that, because if Chapo would have found out at any point, or any of them would have found out, because at that time it was still Mayo it was not fractioned, so they were all together. All three of them, right?
That's right.
So, I just can't even imagine. You know, I got them to walk me through the story. So 8 months, but the feds were like, well, we don't deal with fugitives, so you know they weren't exactly going to protect them,
right?
And so what they had to get a piece of evidence on tape of Chapo, of showing the connection between Chapo and drugs coming into America, into the States. So, you know, everybody knows what Chapo was doing, but they couldn't get that key piece of evidence.
Right,
and that's why the twins were so valuable, because the twins got the key piece of evidence, you know, which we play in the podcast, you know, the podcast I made, Surviving El Chapo.
And it's a pretty famous conversation now.
Yeah.
And they're, just for the listeners that don't know, you can look at, I actually YouTubed it last night. Is it Pete or Jay?
Did your research?
Pete is gets Chapo. He basically orders. No, Pete has a discussion with Chapo. He says, "Hey, could you lower the price on a kilo of heroin?"
Because the heroin I've got isn't bad, but it wasn't bad. So he was lying.
Right.
Because he had to say it was bad, because Chapo would then question why he wanted more.
Right.
So he had to say it was a bad load.
It was bad. I couldn't really move it that well.
Yeah.
If you could drop the price on it, that I can get you your money faster.
Yeah.
And that was enough. That directly linked Chapo to, that was a damning piece of evidence, I believe, right?
Yes.
In the indictment. And
I mean, it was the key piece of evidence, because nobody got Chapo on tape.
Right.
Basically, it was like, you know, recording them actually doing it.
Was there any other, what was the other big, I know eventually in his trial, like after he escaped Mexican prison, they captured him again, and then they finally extradited him. I know like a bunch of people testified against him.
Yeah.
But in the original case, was there any other evidence besides that phone call?
Well, it was their testimony.
Their testimony,
yeah,
right.
and that phone call.
When did they go into prison?
Because it was loads of people's testimonies, right?
Loads.
But they were the only ones that had this like tangible piece of evidence.
Right.
And one of the things Pete said, it's like Pete was the one that had to then go and stand in court and testify against Chapo face to face. And that's in season 2. And you know, even if people don't, well, I want people to listen to the whole thing, but just listen to that.
No, don't say that. Don't say that. Don't tell him just to listen to that either. Johnny, don't say that to Johnny. That's all Johnny listened to last night, and he probably missed it.
Because it's over 2 episodes, and Pete just talks us through it. And Pete's such an amazing storyteller because he's got that trauma in his head, so he tells it like so in the moment because you can feel it viscerally of what's happening, because he's so good at telling that story. Because you can, when I speak to him, you can see he's literally playing it in his head. He's not saying, oh, well, this happened, you know, it's like the emotion and the trauma is still very much in his head. So it makes it like a gripping piece of story to listen to, basically. But he had to go up against Chapo. And I remember him saying to me, like, Pete, well, you know, they could have just played the tape. Because that was it. Yeah. They didn't even, you know, need me to stand there and give testimony, or really anybody else's testimony, because the tape was the tape. That you can't lie on the tape. They proved that it was his voice. You know, as soon as they got the tape, Pete and Jay met the feds in Mexico. 2 of them were there and handed the tape over, and they verified it. And then that was it. That was the key piece of evidence. And they were like, right, we're gonna, you know, we need to take you in the next day.
Gotcha.
And they were like they didn't realize it was going to be so quick. So they weren't prepared to then be lifted out of Mexico. Right. And actually the family, which is another harrowing story.
That was a whole shit show.
Which is another harrowing story, just got left behind, and they had to find their own way across the border. And they just literally had to leave.
Listen, that scene of Val flipping out through the house, looking for pieces of information to make sure that she takes with her, looking for any scraps of paper that could connect them to any place in the U.S., while lying out loud and pretending it's an argument with Jay, and then telling the people she's leaving Jay, and then Jay leaving, and then her packing up Vivi and the kids. And that scene right there is a movie in itself. Scrambling to get the hell out of Dodge.
And they just literally had to leave and pack up. Going back to that thing about they just had to leave the house immediately, and they had to grab any like identifying things on pictures on the wall or anything, and just just leave Mexico. And they had to drive through Los Zetas, the opposition cartels territory, to get across the border. Yeah. And it was literally like, oh my God, again, a really gripping story to listen to for them to get across the border before the cartel found out what Jay and Pete had done. Because all of a sudden, obviously, Jay and Pete disappeared, right?
Right. And so...
Because they were pulled out by the feds.
Of course. So their phones are off. You know, their suppliers can't find them.
Yeah.
How long... Then what happens? Then they're taken to Chicago. They're booked.
They're taken to the U.S.,
Are they charged? Are they recharged with the original indictment from years earlier?
No. Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, he's obsessed with that indictment, boy.
It probably is a combination.
I would assume so,
yeah,
right?
I would assume so. That's a good question. I don't actually...
Because there has to be a punishment hanging over their head, right? In exchange for what they're giving. Yeah. Otherwise, they would just be rats. That's actually the most despicable kind of... Well, no, I hate to use the word rat.
Because of what they've also done. They distributed, you know, at the time... They were the biggest drug traffickers in North America. So it wasn't just the indictment out of shit. They had multiple indictments against them. Sorry, you're right. So
that's my question.
It was the,
So there was an indictment.
There was one out of Wisconsin.
Exactly. It's deeper than you would actually think if you're just hearing it thrown out there like that. There was more than one case.
Illinois, which would be Chicago. There was like so many different indictments out of different areas for them. You're absolutely right. Sorry.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, and then how long, and that was 2005, more or less, 2006. And then Chapo wasn't arrested until...
the second final time was 2015. Right. And that's the one that Pete testified in.
Right. So what were they doing through all those years? Were they in prison?
Cooperating.
Were they also in prison while they were cooperating? and they agreed to
Oh
help.
yeah, they were in prison. They were kept in solitary in the shoe.
Yeah, which is brutal. It's solitary confinement. Shoot, the special housing unit. Where
Special housing unit.
Were they in prison, or were they being held at like the detention center in Chicago or in the area?
Originally, they were held at in Chicago at the MCC.
Yeah, right.
Which by all accounts is where a lot of people are held when they're
That's where all the federal detainees
and
are held.
Yeah.
Well, cooperating or not, that's where, the MCC Brooklyn is where they kept Chapo, MCC Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's like when they're, So they were in Chicago for like around for the first year, let's say.
Right.
And again, there's kind of a little bit of a funny story because every time they were transported, there was like a convoy and it was at the same time that Obama was in the area, and loads of people thought it was Obama's convoy, but actually, like the chances are during that time, it was actually the Flores twins. Not Obama.
Crazy.
So
wow,
loads of people are like, oh, it's Obama. And
so they spent a lot of money guarding these guys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because they were key to getting Chapo.
Of course.
Like they were like high value assets.
Right.
Which is basically what you hear when you hear Sammy the Bull said they brought him in here, big fuss, like they were heavyweights or something. They had a convoy, bro.
So then after that, they were then transported to a different prison, which I'm not allowed to say which one because it was a WITSEC prison. So
a prison just for high value informants.
Yeah. And then they were split, which is again an absolutely fascinating story. So part of the 3 Bs, they got a special privilege where they were allowed to stay together. So initially they were cellies and they were allowed to stay together. Then they were moved from Chicago to another prison, which I'm not allowed to disclose where. And then they were separated because of a absolutely bonkers story, which is in episode 2 of the 2nd season, which you have to listen to. Which, if you want, I can talk through it. And they got separated.
Which you have to listen to, but I'm about to tell you all about it.
And they got separated because of something that they...
Tease it. They can go listen to it.
Okay, so...
you could go listen to it,
oh, God, I don't even know how to tease it.
No, don't tease it, I meant that's enough of a teaser. I want them to go.
Okay, because they did something, and I managed to pull pictures of this thing that they did from back in 2005, 6. And the prison service found out that it was them that did it, and they felt that it compromised the location. And the reason why I can't say the location is because there was really high value people in this location, not high value assets that were in WITSEC under witness protection. It's people that don't, it's like a witness protection in prison.
Right.
But they were held in the SHU, which is special housing unit, which is where they're kept on their own, right? And they got separated in the middle of the night, and then that's the last time they saw each other in prison.
Oh, that's up.
Yeah,
that
which
sucks.
Is again such a like I say fascinating, and I feel really bad saying that, but it is a really compelling story.
Yeah.
Because you listen to what then happened to both of them separately.
It's like each little bit of their hell is a movie in itself.
Then happened to both of them separately. And don't forget, they're identical twins, and it's the first time ever in their entire life that they've ever been on their own.
Aww.
Because, like, I don't know what, whether you've got siblings, but like I've got brothers, younger brothers, but like, I didn't spend every second with them, and I'm older than them, so I spent time on my own, right? Whereas if you're an identical twin, you're like, well, you were friggin' born together, and you were never spent ever.
I think it's one of the first things I said in one of the first episodes, might have been the first episode. You shared a womb, and now you can't even be in the same room together. It was Charlie Webster in episode 1 talking about how it was hard to get them together and how you weren't even supposed to have them in the same room. And I said the irony in sharing a womb and not being able to be in the same room, it being dangerous to be in the same room.
Well, you were friggin' born together, and you were never spent they never spent any time on their own.
They're best friends.
Yeah, they're kind of one. They're closer than best friends. They're like one person.
Yeah.
And they're like two halves, right? So when they got separated, they were like, hang on, it wasn't just about having a friend. It was like,
lost a limb.
That's the other half of who I am.
Right.
And that's how we maneuver. So it's really interesting where they both talk through, because they said that Jay had to be more like Pete, and Pete had to learn how to be more like Jay to try and like survive prison.
That is alone. survive alone. That's fascinating.
And they got separated in different prisons. And I can tell you one place one of them went to, because some of it's protected. So I'm not allowed to say the location, but
so
Jay went after when they got separated from that place where they did the thing, which you need to go and listen to. He went to MCC New York, and it's the one that's now shut down. And because of the horrific conditions, and he said it was just like horrific, and him and his wife actually pushed for him to be moved to a different prison. Yeah. So after I don't know, another 6 to 8 months there, he got moved to another prison, and then Pete ended up getting moved to another prison, and then it was horrific and awful conditions, and he ended up in really awful conditions because they also, one of them, this thing that they did, it was one of them mainly, but the other one got blamed wrongly because they couldn't tell them apart because they're identical, so they couldn't tell them apart and pulled the wrong twin they basically put Jay in the MCC New York thinking it was Pete. Wow. And they did it on purpose to give him bad conditions.
Wow. They could have, what they could have done? Maybe not. Maybe one of them could have turned themselves in and been like, yeah, it was just me. There's only one of us. I did everything. I don't know.
Left
maybe
the other guy on the outside.
Maybe.
This guy's living a movie right now.
But okay, this is crazy. So,
but then what would the other one it'd still been the same thing, right? The other one would have had to go on the run.
Yeah.
And also then it's the whole thing where I don't think they're the same, like they relied on each other so much.
They're one.
Yeah, they're one.
That's such a fascinating thing. Were they in isolation the whole time when they were in prison?
Yeah,
were they allowed out of their cells even?
Well, they were for they had an hour
by themselves though. They would be totally.
Yeah, but they did have at times they did have cellmates, which again is totally sometimes I couldn't even, if I was writing a scripted show, I couldn't even write it as good as this.
Well, that's it. Their life is stranger than fiction. For real. Like this. That's why I say stop getting caught up on one thing. The caveats, the amount of nuances in this story is bananas. It's just stories inside of stories inside of stories. And guess what? You're not even getting all the stories yet.
If I was writing a scripted show, I couldn't even write it as good as this real life. Because, that it's such a stereotypical phrase, but it's like, you couldn't even write this shit. But literally, you couldn't even write this shit.
Don't worry, 50 Cent's working on it right now. He's working on a scripted show.
Don't you worry. Don't forget who created and made the podcast.
Yeah, hell yeah. No, that's dope. I love that, man.
And I mean, it'll make a amazing scripted show.
It'll make 10 different scripted shows.
So they did have cellmates at times, and the crazy cellmate, the crazy coincidence of a cellmate they had, Pete ended up being Sally's with Sammy the Bull, right? And they both got to know Sammy the Bull, and Sammy the Bull taught Jay how to play chess. But Sammy the Bull was the reason which gave them the idea to cooperate. And then what a weird, I don't even believe in coincidences, how they ended up in prison with Sammy the Bull.
Right.
And it was watching a documentary of basically Sammy the Bull cooperating that gave them the idea to cooperate.
That because gave Jay the idea.
Yeah.
Right. That gave Jay the idea. And
yeah, because it was a John Gotti documentary, and Sammy the Bull cooperated. Yeah. But Sammy the Bull had killed loads of people.
Yeah, that's an even
and he only
more
got 5
despicable.
years or something like that. So that was the documentary, and he was like, "Well, then we haven't killed anyone, so maybe we won't get." And that's how it all started. And then Pete ended up being a celly with Sammy the Bull.
It's crazy,
and they played chess together.
And the fact that
they got into beef and had drama with each other.
They only gave him 5 years for 19 bodies.
Yeah, that was
these guys
19,
never killed anyone directly. I mean, I know drugs kill people, a lot of people, but it's just it's the absurdity of the American system. How much time did their lawyers fight for? Like they gave them 14 years. That was their sentence, but were they trying to negotiate down a little bit?
I think they thought they'd get less.
I'm sure they did, right?
Yeah. I mean, they did. They thought they would get less than 14 years. And when Pete testified against Chapo, the government, a couple of the US attorneys put a letter to the judge saying, that to reduce their sentence by 2 years, and they didn't get the reduction.
Didn't get the reduction.
No.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because they were such good cooperators, basically.
Why? Okay, and they got out what year? Are they?
I don't even know if I can say.
But they're not still in there.
No,
though,
they're
right?
not.
Okay, so.
But Yeah, but
Okay.
it wasn't 2019. It was a lot later.
Right. Okay.
But it wasn't this year.
But they did the full 14 years?
Okay, I'll give you a clip.
They did a full 14?
No, they did 12 and a bit.
Got it. So they actually got good time. They must have got good time off.
Yeah, so that was time off, but they
Right.
didn't get 2 years because of cooperating and because Pete faced Chapo. He didn't get any more.
He didn't get any extra.
No, any
Right.
extra, but that was like
Yeah.
the time off. And what is it, like 2 months every year, is it?
You do 85% of your time.
85%, yeah. So they got all good time because of they did courses, like Pete ran a Bible class, Jay ran a self-help, motivational class that he came up with the curriculum of, and they did loads of the courses in prison, and so they got that 85% time off.
You got to be a real up to lose good time in isolation. You know what I mean? Like you got to really be,
well,
a
listen
special
to
kind
episode
of criminal.
2.
Okay. Episode 2?
Yeah, because they did that. That's what got them separated. The few things that they did.
Right.
And the episode's called Baby Bentley Billboard.
Okay.
So that gives you a tease.
That don't give you a tease. That gives you the plot. You didn't gave it away, Charlie. You too giddy. You gotta relax, Charlie. You need to smoke something before you get up
There's
there.
a baby, a Bentley, and some billboards.
Wow.
All 3 separate incidents, all kind of roughly in the first year.
Right. Wow. Okay.
You spent the last half hour teasing this second episode. He even said tease it, don't say nothing, and you still let the cat out the bag. Just episode 2, season 2. That's it. Call it. You're too giddy, man. You gotta relax.